How do you hope that that applies to the university sector and in particular the ANU?
Good morning, Peter. The impact of the coronavirus has been widespread and the university sector is no exception. At ANU, we've been working very hard to ensure that, sorry, that's just something going off in the background, working very hard to ensure that we remain engaged with all of our enrolled students. And that means switching to teaching and learning online and remote learning so that we can remain connected with our students, whether they're across Australia or overseas. In terms of international students, many of them have not been able to come to Australia to attend university because of the travel bans. And so this means a significant reduction over time in revenues. So what we're hoping is that we will be able to open up our borders as soon as the authorities say we can, so that our international students can come to Australia and enjoy the on-campus experience that is unique to ANU within Australian universities.
For government funding, but of course there will be a drop in revenues from the international students in particular who are unable to come to Australia.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. There was claims by Universities Australia this week too that international students who are here in Australia should be given some help. They need some help to pay the bills. From what you can gather, should they be given help? Should they be given extra help?
We certainly have provided assistance from the ANU, from Australian National University. We have provided specific support to international students who had to travel home, who didn't have the funding to do it, who have lost their jobs. We've got a hardship fund as well for all students at ANU that they can apply for that, and we're also providing hardship scholarships. So we're working very hard to ensure that our enrolled students don't miss out on the education that they've paid for. It's going to be a very long journey, and 2021 seems like a world away, and it will be very different. But we're hoping that the travel restrictions can be lifted as soon as possible and give our international students the opportunity to come to Australia perhaps for the second semester, if not the beginning of 2021.
When do you think, at what point, Julie, do you think that the ANU could possibly find itself in serious financial trouble?
Fortunately, ANU has a very robust balance sheet and we are monitoring it constantly. We're having regular meetings with our Finance Committee and with Vice-Chancellor Brian Schmidt and staff to ensure that we can keep as many of our teachers and staff and personnel, because we will come through this and we want to ensure that we've remained connected and engaged not only with our students but with our staff. But of course, it depends how long this pandemic continues and how long the restrictions are in place. So while we are coping now financially and also remaining engaged, virtually all of our international students have remained connected through online courses, and we've been able to put about 600, 700 courses online in a matter of weeks. I don't know how long this is going to last. So, of course, all the universities will be monitoring their situation on a daily basis.
When it comes to China, Alexander Downer was quoted this week as saying that China has lost its prestige from the fallout from coronavirus and how it was handled in the early stages. Do you agree with him?
I think it's too early to say how nations are going to come through this. I'm sure that when the pandemic passes, and that's one thing that we do know from past pandemics, they do eventually end, we will see how nations have emerged. I know there is growing concern about the global concentration of supply chains, and I think this pandemic has put that into sharp relief. Concern about the supply chain focus on China, and I'm sure many nations will be looking to diversify and perhaps bring a greater domestic focus on supply chains, manufacturing and the like. And that could, of course, change the balance of power, it could change the composition of the economies of many nations around the world.
Given what you know from your experience as Foreign Minister, does Australia need to rethink its relationship with China?
Australia's relationship with China is under constant review. It is a relationship that requires a great deal of nurturing and management and building of trust. We are very strong economic partners, but we have very different perspectives on the world. So the relationship with China is one that I know the Australian government and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and other departments work very hard to maintain. But I think that we will see a different world when we pass through this pandemic, and there will be changes in power structures, in the economic base, the economic strength of a number of countries.
Your old boss has got a book coming out on Monday, Julie. Will you be reading it?
Well, I haven't read it, and I may well read it. It depends how long I have to stay in social isolation.
Well, there are two anecdotes that I'd like to ask you about for some clarification. So, Malcolm Turnbull, this is in relation to Kevin Rudd's bid to become UN Secretary-General. Turnbull says that you were told to campaign quite heavily for him behind the scenes. Did that happen?
Yes, I did. I worked very hard to promote a former Australian Prime Minister to have an opportunity to run for the Secretary-Generalship of the United Nations. I'm of the view that former leaders do have an ongoing contribution to make, and Kevin Rudd wanted to be in the contest to be the UN Secretary-General, and so I thought that we should support him to at least be in the contest. It's up to the UN members to decide who they want as their Secretary-General, but I didn't think we should prevent him from at least starting the race.
And was Scott Morrison behind the backflip?
I don't recall those details. I recall very clearly my role in it, but I don't recall the details, but I'm sure Malcolm kept copious notes.
Well, the other point is that he doubts that you could have been Prime Minister. First of all, what do you make of that? Is that disappointing to hear? Does that hurt you?
Well, I had always aimed to be the Foreign Minister, and that was my ambition going into Parliament, and I achieved that, and I had 5 years as Foreign Minister. Very satisfying from a career point of view, and I hope I made a contribution to Australia's relationships with other countries. Oh. So I leave my political career with no regrets. I don't look back, and I'm certainly delighted to be in a third career. I think we should all aim for a third career. So I'm focusing on what I'm doing now. Apart from staying at home, I'm working very hard for a number of companies around the world. I'm on a number of international advisory boards. So I'm finding life to be very challenging and interesting.
Are you disappointed, though, that private conversations have now become very public?
Well, I haven't read the book, so I'd only be speculating.
But I mean, suggesting, conversations that you might have had with Malcolm Turnbull and even conversations that he's had with other ministers, they've all become very public now. I mean, is that disappointing to see and hear?
Well, everybody looks back at their political career in different ways. I'm just focused on the future. I left Parliament with no regrets. I was delighted with the work I was able to do as a Cabinet Minister under a number of Prime Ministers. I was very proud to be the Deputy Leader of the party for 11 years and appreciated the support that I had from my colleagues over those years. So I'm very much focused on the future.